before this New Year's Day, we had moved into this house. And it was a house that would get us closer to my father's new job. He wanted to spend more time with me, more time at home. What none of us knew was that this house had a carbon monoxide gas leak. Now, this is almost 4 decades ago. They had not yet invented the portable detector that most of you would have in your homes. So my mom is fixing up the house. She's fixing up the basement. It's winter. All the windows are closed, and she slowly starts to die. After she collapses, we take her to the hospital. After a long series of blood tests, they find the massive amounts of carbon monoxide in her bloodstream. And I watch Mom go from this healthy, vibrant writer, wife, mother, to an invalid. Her immune system shut down. She was never the same again. And her body instantly became unable to handle anything chemical, any of the normal toxins that we would find in our world, whether it be soap or perfume or even ink from books. I remember my mom still used to like to read, so as a little kid, I would have to bake her books in the oven to try to get out the smell of that new print. And I would take the books up to a bathroom. We'd prepared this special room for her, which was a bathroom covered in tile and then later in aluminum foil. And she was sleeping on a cot that had been washed in baking soda 20 times. And I would give her these books that were slightly charred sometimes, and she would wear white cotton gloves so that the print would not get in her bloodstream. And then she'd wear this charcoal mask, and with the book slid inside a cellophane bag, she'd be able to read. It was really weird, okay? Only child, a mom with multiple chemical sensitivity. So I go into a caregiver role early on. No one really understood her disease. So I'm doing the cooking, I'm doing the cleaning. I'm really helping to take care of Mom. Now, my parents have a very deep Christian faith, so they surprise everybody by not suing the gas company for gross negligence. The gas company had simply improperly installed a furnace with cracks in it. They just didn't want to become bitter. They thought that God would make sense of this, and they didn't want a lawsuit. So I grow up this good Christian kid, taking care of Mom, playing piano on Sundays at church. Everything is going okay in my life until the age of 18. And then I discover New York City. And I learn that, if one was interested in rebelling against a very conservative upbringing, if one was interested in exploring, their own way, maybe outside of the church and outside of the rules, this was a great place to do it. And I learned that there was an actual job in New York City where you could get paid to drink alcohol for free. So it's called a nightclub promoter. If you could get the right beautiful people inside the right nightclubs, you could charge them astronomical amounts to drink. People would actually pay $25 for a gin and tonic that cost about 30 cents to make. They would spend $1,000 on a bottle of champagne that cost 50. So I was enamored by this life. At 18, 3 years before I'm even allowed to be in a nightclub, I start promoting these underground parties. I work at 40 nightclubs over the next 10 years. And this is a picture of my life exactly a decade later. This is my business partner, Brantley. And at this point, we were so successful in this business, we were getting paid $4,000 a month by Bacardi just to be seen with that bottle on our table. And Budweiser, the beer, paid us another $4,000 a month to drink Bud in public. Like, this is amazing. I mean, not only are we drinking for free, we're getting paid by brands just to be seen drinking their product. We're like professional drinkers. What's sad about this photo is that you can see what I thought was important at 28 years old. I am pretentiously craning my wrist here so that the nightclub photographer notices that I have a Rolex watch on. This is what I thought was important. Now, this looks okay. This is around 10 o'clock at night. Somewhere around 4 or 5 in the morning, it was a lot less pretty. After 10 years in this business, I picked up every vice that you might imagine would come with the territory. So I smoked 2 packs of Marlboro Reds for a year. On good long nights, 3 packs. I had a cocaine, ecstasy, MDMA, sometimes Special K problem, drinking problem, gambling problem, pornography, and strip clubs. Everything short of heroin. it looked even worse some days. So I had become this person whose life looked great on the outside, but I was filled with this inner rage, and I was just self-destructive. So I have this cathartic moment where I go to Punta del Este in Uruguay, and I'm on a vacation a decade into my life as a nightclub promoter, and we've rented this compound with servants and horses. My girlfriend is on the cover of Elle magazine. I drive a BMW. I have the stupid watch, and I have a Labrador retriever. I mean, all the things that I thought would make me happy. And I realized that somehow I have become the worst person that I know. I am the most hedonistic, selfish sycophant that's out there. And if I continue down this path, the legacy I'm leaving was a meaningless legacy. I mean, my tombstone might actually read, "Here lies a man who got millions of people wasted." That would have been true about my life. And I realized that I need to make a change. And I start reading the Bible again. I start re-exploring a very lost faith in maybe a different way as an adult without being forced to think that way. I craved morality again, having become such a depraved person. And I asked myself, what would the exact opposite of my life look like? Like, what would the 180-degree turn be? So I come back to New York City, and a couple months later, I go for it. I sell everything I own. I liquidate everything in my life, including 2,000 DVDs that I own. I put it up on eBay as a single lot. I think I got $1,000 for it. They were still worth something back then. And I just wanted to start over. And my thought was, I'm going to do 1 year of humanitarian service, kind of as a penance, as a tithe for the 10 years that I'd wasted. So I applied to all the famous organizations I'd vaguely heard of, right? The World Visions and Save the Children's and Oxfam's and UNICEF's. Scott Harrison, the great nightclub promoter, is now ready for humanitarian service. You can guess how this went. I'm denied by every single organization. Right? They're serious people doing serious work. I'm some drunk kid. So no one will take me. Finally, one organization says, if you are willing to go live in post-war Liberia, and if you are willing to pay us $500 a month, you can volunteer. I'm like, this is perfect. I mean, it's the true opposite. The poorest country in the world at the time, 147 on the UN development chart. And I had to pay to do this. So I dust off a photojournalism degree that I'd gotten from New York University but never used because I was working in the clubs. And I said, look, I'll be your photojournalist. I'll be your storyteller. And by the way, I'm coming on this mission with a guest list of 15,000 people that I've gotten drunk. Some of them work at Chanel and Prada, and some of these people have money. So maybe I'll be able to convert some of them to the cause. So I joined this medical mission, and I don't know how many of you heard of this group called Mercy Ships. They've been at it for about 30 years, and they sail a giant hospital ship up and down the coast of Africa with a very simple idea: bring the best doctors and surgeons in the world on their vacation time to people who need access to medical care. So I live, down around the waterline. I move into 125 square feet, 12-meter cabin with 2 roommates that worked in the engine room. I immediately begin to feel sorry for myself, and then I realize how the people of Liberia are living. The country had no electricity. They had no running water. They had no sewage system. There was 1 doctor for every 50,000 people in the country. The houses that were once beautiful had been decimated by Charles Taylor and his 14-year war led by children. If you got sick in this country, you were out of luck. So before the ship actually sailed into the port, a small advance team posted these flyers all throughout the country. And they said, hey, look, if you've got a giant facial tumor, if you've got flesh-eating disease, if you were born with a cleft lip or a cleft palate, turn up on this day, and our doctors will triage you, we'll screen you, and we'll see if we can help you. Friends, I will never forget my 3rd day on this mission, my 3rd day in Africa. I learned that the government has given us a football stadium, a soccer stadium, where we're going to be able to bring the patients in and triage them. And I know that we have 1,500 available surgery slots to fill. I'm like, is it possible that there are 1,500 people with these conditions in the country? 5 in the morning, I put on hospital scrubs, I jump into Land Rovers with the medical teams. We roll up towards the stadium, we turn the corner, and there's more than 5,000 people standing outside. And I have this profound moment. I just begin to weep, realizing, oh my gosh, we're going to send 3,500 people home with no hope, with no help. I later learned many of these people had walked for more than a month, often with their children, some from neighboring countries, just to see a surgeon. The first child that we let in was this little boy named Alfred. And he was 14 years old, and he was suffocating to death on his face with a benign tumor. This is called an amelioblastoma, completely benign. This is his mom. She'd camped out about 3 days before on the stadium door. Pulls out a photo and says to me through a translator, she said, 4 years ago, my son was fine. He was healthy. Normal 10-year-old boy. And then this tumor starts growing, and there's nowhere to take him to. They actually took him to witch doctors who cut him with knives, and they applied pastes, and the tumor just got bigger and bigger. This was him 4 years later. He's suffocating to death. So I learned we were there to help. Alfred's story would end well. A couple days later, I scrubbed up again. I was in the surgery. I was documenting these amazing surgeons, who could be in the Maldives with their families or the Caribbean, on vacation, on yachts. But instead, we're in Liberia, helping people like Alfred. A couple weeks later, I got to take him home with his new face, and I got to watch this little boy heal. This is what life was like on this ship. It was amazing. I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd go down and document, photograph the patients scheduled for surgery that day. This woman, Martha Lean, told me that this tumor had been growing for 8 years. And she said, if people see me in public, you can kind of see she's got a colorful towel in her hand at the bottom of the frame. She said, if people see me in public, they throw rocks at me. They stone me because they think I am spiritually cursed. She needed a 40-minute surgery just to cut out a very benign mass. So that first year, I took 50,000 photographs, and I am blasting my club list the whole time with these stories and images. You can imagine I got some unsubscribes. Okay? Email open rates were like 100% back then. So some people said that was really cool, that party you invited me to at the Chanel store, but I didn't sign up for tumors and leprosy and cleft lips. But other people, most people, they were moved. They began to send money to Mercy Ships. They said, I want to volunteer like you. How can I give my time in the service of others? So I signed up for a second tour. I didn't know what was next. And on that second tour, I got off the ship, and I got into the rural areas, and I saw the water that people were drinking. I saw dirty water for the first time. I learned that 50% of the people living in Liberia were drinking from swamps and ponds and rivers. You don't have to be that smart to make a connection between health or disease and water like this. I met a 13-year-old girl named Hawa and just realized that the only water she knew her entire life to drink, to bathe, to cook, to clean her clothes with came from this swamp. Later learned that 52% of all disease throughout the developing world is caused by bad water, lack of sanitation. So I begin telling these surgeons in the operating theater what I'm seeing out there, and they're like, please go work on this issue. If the country had clean water, there wouldn't be 5,000 people standing outside a stadium. There wouldn't be things growing on people's faces. People wouldn't be blind with trachoma, a waterborne disease. So I came very interested in this issue after my 2 years there. I come back to New York City, my friends are still buying bottles of water in nightclubs for $10 and not opening them. They would just order them on their table and let them sit there and drink champagne or vodka instead. So the contrast was just too much for me. And I knew back in New York that I wanted to bring clean drinking water to everyone on earth. This would be my life's mission. I was 30, maybe I had 40, maybe even more years left that I could dedicate and take everything I'd learned in the past and apply it to this problem. So I'll talk a little bit about the problem. This is the current state of affairs. 663 million people today are living on this planet drinking dirty water. 1/10 of the planet. Now, America officially has 100% water coverage. Some of these countries where we work have 20% water coverage, 18% water coverage. And I put up a statistic like this, and it's just hard, honestly, even for me, it's hard for us to feel anything. 1 out of 10, 663 million. So over the last 10 years, we've been telling stories of individual people. The statistics, kids like John Bosco, who lives in southern Rwanda, and this is the only water that he's known his entire life. You guys look at a picture like this, and you probably wouldn't let your dog drink this water. We certainly wouldn't let our children or drink this water ourselves. This is all he has. It's all he's known his whole life. It's a little girl in Honduras just drinking from a river. This looks more like chocolate milk than water. I just began to learn about all the disease associated with bad water. Some of their names. We've all heard of cholera. We've all heard of E. coli. I had never heard of schistosoma before, which is a fancy word for parasites. Came across this child in eastern Kenya, and she was drinking from the Molo River, and every time she would drink from the river, she would vomit on her shirt. I was with a few supporters. We watched in horror for a few cycles, and then we took the water away from her. Promised to try to find a lasting solution for her village. But I took this bottle back to New York City, and I gave it to a lab at a university and said, hey, would you put this under a microscope? Show me exactly what she's drinking. This is what they sent me back. They said, the water you sent us is alive. No child should be drinking water that looks like this. As I traveled around, I've now been to 69 different countries, I learned that leeches were a huge problem for rural communities. I had never, I don't even think about leeches, period, but I certainly would never associate a leech with drinking water. But community after community, they would hold out their hands and they'd show us the leeches that they were filtering out of their water. They'd say, the big ones, never a problem. We can always get them out. But sometimes these little leeches, they get through our filtration. They get through the cloth that the women are pouring the water through, and they grow up and they crawl up to the back of our throat. The first couple times I heard this, I thought, look, this is an exaggeration. But I would hear that parents would give their children diesel fuel. They would have their kids swallow diesel fuel to kill the leech. Because they say, well, if we take a stick and we try to just kill the leech, normally we're not successful and the leech just crawls up again. Diesel fuel helps to kill the leech. I learned that there was a huge link between education and water. 11 years ago when I started, more than 50% of the schools in the world lacked clean water and toilets. Now the number's a third. I know there are many people in this room, really everybody, passionate about education. 1 out of every 3 schools around the world doesn't have water or toilets. You can imagine what this means for teenage girls. They get their period. There's no water at their school. There's no toilet. They stay home 5-6 days every month. You'd be ashamed to go to a school. There's already enormous social pressure, as you know, in many of these countries, against girls being educated. They're too useful at home, getting the water, getting the firewood, helping around the house. And it breaks our heart to see girls in the middle of the day that should be getting educated. They should be the future leaders of their country, and they are walking 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours a day with dirty water on their backs, 40 pounds in old diesel cans. Water that's not even helpful. One thing I've learned, no matter where I go in the world, this is exclusively a women's issue. I have never seen men get water. Whether I'm in India or Nepal or Cambodia or Sub-Saharan Africa or Honduras or Bolivia, it is the job and the role of the women and the girls to get the water. The men are often farming, providing an income, but it's the women that are getting the water, and we see them in the most undignified positions, digging in the hole. There's a woman digging in a sandy riverbed in Kenya, just trying to find water. These women nearby were getting water from this river, and they said the biggest problem is crocodile attacks. And they began to name women who came here to get water and were never seen again. Imagine if this is the quality of water, and then you have to worry about risking your life. The story that's impacted me the most is a story from Ethiopia, and I've been there 30 separate times now since starting Charity Water. About 5 or 6 trips ago, I was sitting in a pretty crappy hotel, about $5 a night hotel room up in the north, and I was sitting with a few of our supporters, and the hotel owner recognizes me as the Charity Water guy, and he sits down at our table and says, you've been working in this region for a while, you're doing important work. Let me tell you a story. So he says, I'm from a faraway village, it's called Maida, a couple thousand people live there, and he said, growing up, all the women in my village used to walk 8 hours for water. And he said, there was a woman in my village, one day after her 8-hour walk, before she got to her house, she slipped and fell, and she broke her clay pot, and all the water spilled. He said, she didn't go back for water. She hung herself from a tree in my village, and we found her body swinging there. He let that sit for impact, and he said, the work you're doing is important. Disappeared into the kitchen. I remember thinking, no way that's true. Tell the international donor a shocking story, encourage us in the work that we're doing, but people aren't hanging themselves from trees because they spill water. But the story nagged at me and had to go there myself and see whether it was true. This was not an easy place to get to. I flew to Addis Ababa, I flew up to Mekelle in the north. I drove for 5 hours, and then the road ended. And I rented this donkey, put my solar backpack and a bunch of water for the week, and hiked 9 hours over the mountains to reach this man's village. Got there at the end of the day, pitched my tent next to the chief's house, and over the next week, I began to learn how these people were living and learn the story of Ledikiros Hailo. I met her mom the next morning. Learned about what she was like and her dreams for a better life. Her mom said the problem is her death actually changed nothing in this village, and people are still going to the same spot. So you can go walk there now. So she sends me over to her best friend's house, a girl named Yeshereg, and she says, look, here are the pots that we used to use in the rope that we would use to tie them around our shoulders. She said, the good news is the pots have now been replaced by these yellow jerry cans. They're lighter, they're more durable, but we are still walking to the same place. Come with me. So we get to the edge of the plateau, and she said, the water is all the way at the bottom. So we hike down these treacherous paths. As we get to the bottom, we find there's a long line of other women that got there first, and they have lined up their jerry cans. Just for a moment, to put this in perspective, one of those cans is 2 toilet flushes for us. 20 liters, 5 gallons. Not bad enough that you're walking for hours, then you're waiting, and then you're hauling the 40 pounds back up to your home. This was the source, just a little bit of seepage. There was another source, but it was even farther. Went to the church where her funeral was given. I met the priest who did the service, and he showed me her grave, just this little pile of rocks out behind the church. And then before I left, they took me to the tree. And I didn't know this until I traveled all the way there, but this was a little girl. She was 13 when she died. I had imagined this as a woman in her 60s or 70s, just tired of walking, tired of living. It's a 13-year-old girl. And they found her on this tree next to the path. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room believes 13-year-old girls should not be hanging themselves because they were born into a situation where they had to walk for dirty water, and they tripped and fell. The great thing about working on this issue is it's a solvable problem. We actually know how to bring clean water to everybody on Earth. I have a lot of friends that are working on the cures for diseases. They're working on vaccines. It's not like that with water. We don't want to give clean water to everybody on Earth. We haven't created the will to do it. We haven't created the resources, but we know how to do it definitively. There's not a single person on Earth that we can't get clean water to. So we've always taken a solution-agnostic approach, now funding over 11 different technologies. Different things work in different environments. Sometimes you can dig a well, drill a well, build rainwater harvesting systems, build gravity-fed systems, cap mountain springs, bio-sand filters, pond sand filters, UV, carbon, UF filters. A lot of different things work, but it's always possible to help. At its simplest, we can often drill a well for $12,000. And not only does a community living on $1 or $1.50 a day not have $12,000, they don't have access to $1 million drilling rig and compressors and trucks. They are more than willing to contribute the labor. In fact, in this photo, this community spent 3 months building a road across a huge ravine so that the drilling rig could come into their village. They don't have access to the skilled hydrologists who can actually find the water and protect it. And I'll tell you, it is one of the most amazing things, amazing moments, to be there when they find clean water. And they flush the well, and water shoots out of the ground like a geyser. This was a school in northern Ethiopia. 2,000 children had never had clean water before. We got so much water, it was not only enough for the school and toilets, it was enough for an entire community, over 5,000 people. They were on top of a massive lake of clean water, a huge aquifer. Often the kids will rush the drilling rig and the parents are all trying to pull them back, but they're splashing, they're dancing. I'll play you just a short video clip. This was the village that spent 3 months building the road. And this was the moment clean water was found in this village in Malawi. So you can imagine what that would be like. Communities will tell us there was the time before the water and after the water. It becomes this defining moment. We've said for 10 years, if we had a slogan, this would be it: water changes everything. Water has so many impacts. We believe it's the best way to lift people out of extreme poverty. It impacts health, and there's tons of data behind all this now. It radically impacts education. If kids have clean water and toilets at their school, you get better students. If kids have clean water at home and they're not walking 4 or 5 hours a day, you get better students, more time to study, less time out sick. And it deeply impacts women. And one of the things that surprised me most over the years is when I go into a village and I ask women, how are your lives different now? I'm always expecting them to talk about the quality of the water. We were drinking disgusting water before. Now the water's clean. They never do. They always talk about the time freed up. This year, 40 billion hours will be wasted by women in Africa alone getting water. Imagine being a woman walking 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is not a Monday through Friday gig. If you don't walk for water Saturday, you don't drink water on Saturday. Imagine getting 49 hours back, just like that, every week. We hear stories of small businesses that are being started. Women will sell things at market, rice, peanuts. I was in Zimbabwe and Zambia recently with women selling carpets, rugs that they were making with their hands. Many women tell us that they're better mothers. They spend more time with their children. And what I love about the issue, and it is even more true today than when I started, is it's one of the very few things in the world everyone can agree on. I never come off stage and have people tell me to stop what I'm doing. Scott, you're wasting your time. Stop giving humans clean drinking water. They should die, kids should die drinking from ponds. No one says that. And I'm sure there are people in this room with wildly different political views, wildly different religious affiliations or no religious affiliations. But everybody can come together and say clean water is a basic need for flourishing, for life. If you have a 13-year-old girl committing suicide on one end of the spectrum, you have this woman, Helen Appio, on the other end of the spectrum. She was a woman from northern Uganda. She got clean water, and we were trying to just see how her life was different. So our team was trying to sneak into her village after a very long day of site visits and celebrations, and we just wanted to very low-key just see the water point, make sure it was being used well. Helen somehow gets wind of the tour. You'll see her here in the green, shuts down the road. Okay, so that goes on for a while. It ends, and we sit with Helen, and we just simply say, you know, how is your life different? And she begins to tell us the story of these 2 yellow jerry cans. She said every day I would walk a far distance. She was actually walking for clean water to a faraway well. But she said it was never enough water. I had a husband, I had 2 children, and I would make decisions every day. What do I do with this limited amount of water? Do I cook? Do I clean? Do we drink it? How much do we drink? Do I wash my husband's clothes? Do I wash my kids' school uniforms? She said, as a Ugandan woman, I always put my family first. I never used the water for me. She said, now that I can walk minutes to a water point, now that I can get all the clean water I want, she says this to our team. She says, now I am beautiful. And we're like, of course, Helen, you're a beautiful Ugandan woman. What do you mean? She said, I don't think you understand. For the first time in my life, I have enough water to wash my face and my body and my clothes. And she said, I feel beautiful. She said, now I'm looking so smart. She had on her best dress that day. And we realized, wow, water also has the power to restore dignity, to make a woman feel beautiful. I started the organization 11 years ago, and it was a startup story. I came back completely broke at 30 from my Mercy Ships experience. I'd given all my money to Mercy Ships and the people that I'd met along the way, and my old club partner took me in. I was sleeping on a closet floor next to this living room, and he said, you can use my living room as your office. And I was running around telling everybody, I want to bring clean water to everybody on earth. I had stopped partying. I never smoked again. I never gambled again. I never touched coke or any of that stuff. So I came back to New York. My friends just thought I was a bummer. I'm walking around with a laptop showing them pictures of tumors and dirty water. They're like, bro, you are no fun. I'm like, I'm going to do this. As I start talking to people, I realize this is not going to be easy because everyday people do not trust charities. Now, I was 30. I was just talking to my friends, not institutional philanthropists. This was 10 years ago, and I realized, wow, people don't trust charities in this country. I would hear charities are black holes. Oh, I don't know how much of my money is actually going to reach the people. High overheads. You would hear all of these excuses. There was data behind this. Came across a USA Today poll, found 42% of Americans said they distrust charities. NYU did a study, found that 70% of Americans said they either believed charities wasted money or badly wasted money. This shocks people. America's known for being incredibly generous. Only 30% of the people polled thought charities did the right thing with money. So trust was at a low. And I thought, what if we could win back these disenchanted people? What if we could give them a new system? What if we could completely reinvent or reimagine charity? Charity means love. It's caritas in Latin. It means to help your neighbor in need and get nothing in return. Thought we needed more of that in the world. So the mission would be to bring clean water to people in need, but the real vision, the bigger idea, was to create a culture of compassion, empathy, generosity, radical generosity, and restore people's faith in giving of their time and talent and money in the service of others, that it would make a difference, that it would matter. So I had a couple big ideas to solve this cynicism, this distrust. The first was we were going to create a business model where you could never use an excuse around money. We would find a way where 100% of every dollar we'd ever raise would go directly to fund water projects and give people clean water. No overhead. Opened up 2 bank accounts and said, I'm going to raise the overhead completely separately from a very small group of wealthy people who can get excited about paying for office rent and flights and salaries. But the public won't be able to use that excuse. We'll send every penny straight to the projects. The second thing is we said, wow, we've just created a business model where money isn't fungible. It doesn't go into one big pot. So let's use technology to prove where that money goes. We started the same year as Google Earth, and I realized that Google was giving us this free place where we could pinpoint every water point. We could build the most hyper-transparent charity. Build a data layer and say, we have nothing to hide. If we have 100 wells, well, then everybody in this room should be able to visit all 100, or 10,000 wells, or 100,000. I wanted to build a beautiful brand. As I looked at charities in general, I just saw a lot of shame and guilt. You guys remember those commercials? You know, the sad eyes of the kids with flies landing on their face in slow motion and the 800 number that comes up. The great brands in the world do not use shame and guilt to manipulate people. Think about Nike. It would be as if Nike said, hey, America, hey, world, you're really fat and ugly and lazy. Why don't you go for a run? It's not what Nike does. They tell stories of greatness, of people overcoming the impossible odds, overcoming adversity, people without legs completing marathons. And we look at that and we want to be better. We want to find that greatness inside us, and then we buy their products. But that's not how charities have acted. They said, you have too much. You need to give back. I hate that language. Give back. Makes it sound like we have plundered and pillaged to such extent we should finally throw some scraps to the poor. Well, give back a little. Just give. Lose the back. Build a culture of giving in your company, in your family, in your life. Sorry, that was a rant. Most important, Nick Kristof said in the New York Times, toothpaste is being peddled with far more sophistication than all of the world's life-saving causes. Doritos can spend hundreds of millions of dollars marketing food that kills us and our children. There is science behind this. And the most important causes in the world have anemic brands, often a poverty mentality. Our website can't look too good. Our office can't look too nice. People think that, we're spending our money on the wrong things. Imagine what it would look like to build a brand about inspiration and imagination. So I just thought we need to create a culture of excellence. We need to hire the best designers in the world to leave Tesla, to leave Apple, to leave Nike, and use their design skills for good. We're going to care about brand. Most important thing is we're not going to send anybody that looks like me to Africa or India or Asia to drill a well. Our role would be getting people to care about this issue, raising as much money as possible, but for the work to be sustainable, it had to be led by the locals. Truly believe that. So we began to just find these amazing partners around the world, guys like Joe Madiath in the bottom right. He has been at it in Orissa, India for 35 years. When he was a kid, he saw his grandfather feed a worker from a hole in the ground. And he asked his grandfather, he said, why would you feed that man like you feed our dogs? His grandfather says, because they're all dogs, those people. And something in this little boy snapped. And for 3.5 decades, he's been using water and sanitation to bring equality to his own people. We wanted to help increase the capacity of his organization, to take him from 300 local employees to 3,000 and give him the resources to help more people. So that was the model. Give away 100%, prove it to the public, build a beautiful brand, and always work through local partners. Day one, I had no better idea than to throw a party for myself in a nightclub for my birthday. I lured 700 people there by giving them open bar, and on their way in, I said, you've got to donate $20 to get into the party, and 100% is going to go to help people get clean water. We raised $15,000 that night, and then we took it to a refugee camp in northern Uganda immediately, where 31,000 people were living, and they were drinking from this swamp. We wish we could have done more, but we had the money to rehabilitate 6 wells. And we sent the photos and the GPS back to the 700 people that came. And I remember the emails I got. Some people didn't even remember coming to the party. They had been to a lot. Like, wow, this is amazing. I did something good. Most people were just shocked that a charity would report to them on $20. They had never expected to hear from us again. They actually did something. And we said, this is magic. Let's just build in this feedback loop. Let's do this on repeat. And maybe people will continue to give. Maybe we can restore their faith in giving. We came up with ad campaigns. We said we don't always have to take ourselves so seriously. We can have a little fun with the brand. Imagine if, We didn't have water in our everyday activities. Imagine giving your kids Kool-Aid powder. Imagine giving your kids death in a baby bottle. So it kills 4,500 kids daily. We got donated space on buses and taxi tops. We shot rich people in New York City in the same situations that people we were seeing around the world. Imagine if your mom had to drink water that looked like that, or your kids who go to a private school had to haul water up there. Imagine my banker friends in their fancy Brioni suits had to go to Central Park Pond at lunch. We'd never allow this. Why was it okay for a tenth of the world simply because they were born in places that didn't have clean water? We built a digital-only business, became the first charity to get 1 million Twitter followers, the first charity to use Instagram. We just never direct mailed. We thought that was the old way. That wasn't the future. The movements of the future would be built on social media. We'd be able to connect and celebrate our supporters. Then we stumbled on this idea where we asked people to donate their birthday to Charity Water. We said, you know what? You're having your next birthday. You do not need any more crap. You don't need a tie. You don't need a wallet. Women, you don't need another handbag or shoes. None of us need an iTunes gift card. So I thought the idea would be getting people to ask for their age in dollars. So I did my 32nd birthday. I asked everybody to donate $32 for my 32nd birthday. This kid in Austin, Texas starts knocking on doors, asking for $7 donations. He raises 22 grand. Well, I lived in a nice neighborhood. So this idea of birthdays starts spreading, and Tony Hawk gives up his birthday, and Jack Dorsey, who created Twitter, gives up 3 birthdays, raises almost $200,000. Angela Ahrens, who sits over 50,000 people at Apple, raises $100,000 with her 53rd birthday. Will and Jada Smith in Hollywood donate their birthdays. They then ask their fans to follow their lead. Then they come with me because they wanted to see what they had done in Ethiopia. So this idea just starts to spread. Working with tech CEOs and celebrities was cool, but the core, the heart of the movement was 6-year-old kids in New York City, 16-year-olds in the middle of the country, or 89-year-olds like Nona Ween. She writes here in her mission statement, I'd like to make turning 89 possible for more people. She realized she has lived double the life expectancy in many of these countries just because of the privilege she was born into, the healthcare system. So if her 89th birthday could help people have more birthdays, and that's what she wanted to do. There was a little 9-year-old girl in Seattle, heard me speak, donated her birthday after the speech, raised $220. She was disappointed because her goal was $300. 2 weeks after her birthday, she's killed in a car crash. And word of her birthday wish begins to spread through her Seattle community. It starts to spread across the country. It starts to spread to Europe and then down to Africa. People start beginning to donate $9 in her memory. 37,000 strangers donate $9 or more. She raises $1.3 million. So many of those donors went on to follow her lead. They raised another $2 million. She went from $220 raised to help 10 people. Over $3 million of impact. It was a powerful idea. What we learned through all this was that Charity Water wasn't our story. So many organizations, they make themselves the hero. Look at us. We're saving the world. We have intentionally never done that. We say, look at our volunteers. Look at our donors. Look at people like Rachel compassionately giving up our birthdays. Look at our amazing local partners like Joe Madiath, who's been at it 3 times longer than I have. We try to celebrate everybody else except ourselves. We're the guide in the story. We are trying to take people who want to make a difference and connect them to the locals who can. And it's been very, very powerful. This has allowed it to grow organically and people to feel like this really is a part of their story. This is a part of their life and their mission. We focus on radical transparency. We've got drilling rigs out there now that we've crowdsourced, and we mount GPS units to them so people can see where they are at any given time. Our drilling rigs have Twitter accounts, and they tweet their location. As we started scaling across the world, we hit about 10,000 projects, and we said, it's not good enough anymore just to know where the projects are. We want to know that they're working over time. So we went to Google, and we won a $5 million grant to go build a remote sensor, We said we want to install a $100 sensor on a $12,000 well, and we want to know how much water is continuing to flow 5 years on, 7 years on. We installed 3,500 remote sensors in Africa in the pilot. The minute we did that, we got the largest data set of rural water supply in the history of the world. No one bothered to do this before for poor people. Most people drill a well and leave. Say, hey, it's up to you now. Monitoring over 1 billion liters. Now we can pull out a well from the map that's got a sensor on it and not only see photos of it, exactly how much it costs, the satellite images of the neighboring community. Now we can see daily flow rates and use this data to even predict pending failure. We have teams of mechanics that are out there responding to sensor data. And it's amazing to see some of the patterns. We're seeing that women are getting up at 4:02 a.m. in many of these villages in the cool of the day to get clean water. You'll see a dip in the afternoon in the heat and then an afternoon rush in the early evening. 11 years of charity water. We've now been joined by over 1 million people that have said, you know, a lot of problems in the world. I could just do nothing. I mean, what is water for 1/10 of the world? I've got water. Why would I do anything about this? 1 million people have rejected the apathy that would kind of be easy with an issue like this. And they said, I can do something about it. They've contributed over $300 million, allowing us to bring clean and safe drinking water to 20,000 villages across 26 different countries and clean water for 8.2 million people. Right now, I'm so proud of this. We employ 1,600 locals across the world. 600 people in East Africa alone getting up every single day, taking our money, taking our community's money, and leading their communities, their country forward. They're the ones getting the credit. It's so exciting. I was recently in a country where, we've invested $60 million. Nobody knows who we are. They know our local partners. They're the ones getting the credit. So we look to the future, looking back, this dude, I wouldn't be here if it had ended there. And as I found my purpose, I was transformed from this person of rage, of selfish, absorbent, hedonism, and I've been blessed. I've gotten to work with my wife for 9 years at this. I've been blessed with 2 beautiful kids and a family. I got to go back and visit that first well built from my birthday party. This is what it looks like. It is not a pretty well after 10 years. We reckon it's been pumped 50 million times. This handle has been up and down 50 million times over 11 years. Water was still flowing in that camp in Uganda. And John Bosco, I showed you this little boy early on, drinking from this swamp, with his family, water just untouchable, unthinkable to us. And then one day, someone learns about this issue and people that are suffering, and they give money, and drilling rigs start heading towards his village, and they pull off the paved roads, and they go deep into the bush, and he watches local Rwandans jump out. Heroes to a teenage boy. And they find water, and they start building the well, and less than a week later after they arrived, he's drinking clean water for the first time in his life. Now, what's great about doing something for a long time is you can go back and look at the impact. So we visited him 8 years after the first time, and we found that our boy, John Bosco, was not a boy anymore. He was a man. And in that time, he got married, and he had a daughter. This is his daughter, Jean-Marie. We realized she never had to drink that water. She was born after the clean water. And this cycle of vicious water poverty in her village had been broken for $10,000 in that case. And knowing we've been able to do that in 28,000 villages keeps us going. And there's always the next village and the next village and the next John Bosco and the next child being born. As we look forward, it's a lot of people, 8.2 million. I'm not going to lie, the local stadium, it would fill it up over 100 times. I was at Madison Square Garden 2 nights ago in New York City for a concert, and I looked at my wife and said, it's 441 of these. So it's a lot of people. But it's 1.2% or 1/80th of the global problem. So we really feel like we've got our work cut out for us. I mean, we're at the very beginning of this journey. We now have 11 years of experience. We've learned a lot, but we have to do so much more. We're helping 150 people get clean water every hour, but we want that to be 1,500 people every hour, and then 15,000 people every hour, until we can say, finally, that everybody on earth has clean water. If you're there and you're wondering how you might help, if this issue is something that you are passionate about, I would invite you to join us. Come along. I left my wife and kids at home. I'm going to be home at 1 a.m. tonight. I'm going to be up at 6 a.m., but I'm here because I'm passionate about this. I get to stand in the gap for the people I've met who can't ask for help themselves. Probably the best way you can help, as we hit 10 years, we started building a brand new community called The Spring. And we said the birthdays have been great, all these million one-time gifts have been great, but what if we could adopt the Netflix model? What if we could ask people to subscribe to clean water every month at whatever level they could afford? What if we could build a continuous community of givers so generous, so constant, the world had never seen anything like it before? Netflix has over 100 million members. What if we could get 10,000, 100,000, 1 million members who cared about clean water showing up every single month in need? We created The Spring, and we kind of anchored it around $30. Every $30 we can bring one human being, one John Bosco, one Helen Appio, one Letta Kiros, from dirty water to clean water. We said there's a lot of people that can do 2 Netflixes a month, or 3 Spotifys, or 2 HBOs, $1 a day. Some people can do $10 a month. We have tons of children that are donating their allowances around the world. We have people in their 90s writing me that are donating their pensions. So this community began to grow. We said our job is just to tell people what we're doing with their money, to keep them updated, to keep them informed, to keep them inspired. It's now grown to 94 countries around the world. We have people in Bulgaria, we have people in Ghana, we have people in Nigeria, we have people in Guadeloupe, people in Poland showing up every month for clean water, knowing that they get nothing from the subscription. 100% of the value is passed on to people who need clean water. If you'd like to get more information or join us in this, my wife is a Spring member, I'm a Spring member. It takes about 30 seconds to join this amazing community of people who are generous, who care about others. So I invite all of you. I'll end just with the last word. Maybe you're not passionate about water. Maybe you're here passionate about another issue. I'll share with you my favorite quote. Somebody walked by a bodega 10 years ago and sent me this photo. Do not be afraid of work that has no end. I love this. Because if your work is in the service of others, if you're truly working to end needless suffering, whether it's water, whether it's people that are hungry, whether it's people enslaved in sex trafficking rings, whether it's people who need a roof over their head, your work will never end. And that used to scare me, and now I've really embraced this. I think when we get to the day when we end this problem, when everybody has clean water, we're not going to drop the mic and go work at a bank. We're going to turn everything we've learned over 20, 30, 40 years, we're going to turn our whole community, hopefully 10, 20, 30 million people, on another issue, on another basic need to end suffering. And I know there are probably budding social entrepreneurs out there. Let me just tell you, if a nightclub promoter with no experience can raise $330 million and help 8 million people get clean water, whatever you are passionate about, you can do it too. So I hope you will follow your dream. I hope you will follow a life that serves others, and I hope you'll join us too, because everybody needs clean water. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much.